It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
That's right, everybody. Welcome to 41 is the Mic. I am Matt Derrick alongside offensive tackle arm length enthusiast Nick Jacobs from KSHB 41. Nick, how closely have you been monitoring the arm length of every offensive tackle at the Combine?
Very closely. Only 5 of 26 matched what the Chiefs wanted. So when I'm going to introduce myself to people, I'll be like, "Hi, Nick Jacobs, O-line enthusiast. What's your reach?" Some people may think it's social media, but I mean arm length.
Just stand 34 inches away from every offensive tackle and see if they can touch you.
I'm gonna visually decide based on how many lengths of me equal up to 34.
The crazy thing that came out of this is that there's also been a huge discrepancy between players' measurements at the college bowl games.
Yeah.
For the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl, all of them. It's been both of them, so it hasn't been one. But a huge discrepancy, almost entirely to the players' favor in the bowl games. And the Combine showing them. I know one person on Twitter posted a graph and chart showing that the average discrepancy was about a half inch. And some players had like an inch discrepancy between their arm length and what's been measured at the Combine. But this is the year of the T-Rex offensive tackle, Nick. There's everybody just.
So they're gonna have to treat it like they're gonna do the first down marker and just have to figure out a way to do it.
How do you get the Hawkeye technology to measure offensive tackle arm length?
May have to with the way things are going, apparently.
Well, I get this because a couple of weeks ago we were doing some Combine measurements over at the Sports Radio 810 studios, and so we were measuring all of our arm lengths and hand sizes. And so I can tell you that my hands are considerably smaller than Kendall Gammon's, but I've got him on arm length, so I got that going for me.
Congrats! What was your arm length?
I think it came in 35 inches. And even I disputed that. I think it's closer to 35 and a half, maybe 36 on a good day. But
all right.
But a week ago, Nick, we're doing 41 is the Mic. It was a week of will he or won't he? Is Travis Kelce coming back? Are the Chiefs going to be able to keep Trey Smith? We got the answers to pretty much both those questions this week. Thanks to text messages to Pat McAfee and thanks to the transaction wire of Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah. So, with Travis Kelce, he allegedly texted, but then the new heights putting out from the desk of Travis Kelce's come back for 13. I feel like that's as close to official as you can get, other than Brett Veach and, Pat McAfee reading a text message that may or may not have been from Travis. Not saying it wasn't. We just can't visually confirm it. So, unfortunately, that's just how we have to go about it. But I trust Pat McAfee on it. I feel like he's got a direct line to the bat phone. And with Trey Smith, they put the franchise tag on him. You hope it's not on there very long, and the Chiefs can get a long-term deal done and get a base, a year-one salary cap hit wise that can kind of fit in that $6 to $8 million range, and then you kind of slowly rise it up over time and put the year 4 and year 5 to be the big cap hits that average out to the APY that you hope they end up agreeing upon. But you can't guarantee 100% that Trey Smith's locked in, set and situated until you get that long-term extension.
Yeah, and it was a whirlwind because we really went from on Tuesday hearing from Brett Veach and Andy Reid and certainly seeming optimistic about Travis Kelce and optimistic about Trey Smith. And then within 72 hours, it went from just optimism to basically getting confirmation that they're both going to be Chiefs in 2025. So the NFL world comes at you fast, Nick. And we've got 8 to 10 more days of life coming at you fast. So you don't have to really worry about the Chiefs and March 4th deadline because they've already addressed that as far as designating their franchise player. That's been taken care of. Next week, midnight, Sunday, Monday morning, the offers will start flying as far as the negotiation window starting to open for free agency. And then Tuesday, the 12th, 3 p.m. Central Time is when deals can start to become official. It's the start of the new league year. Maybe we need to have like an online celebration. I don't know. I've always wanted to do like a start of the new league year party where, we drop the football at Union Station or something.
Well, you want to know the problem with that?
Lay it on me.
Big 12 tournaments going on at the same time. It always is during free agency week.
That is true. Yeah, finding the right venue for 3:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday to start the new league year would be tough. Maybe we can pull it off one year. That's my dream.
Well, Matt, there's always an opportunity, but while the Big 12 is in town and it coincides with the free agency, it's going to be a little bit tougher for certain landmark areas.
Well, the Trey Smith situation may, at least in the short term, is solved. And as you mentioned, the Chiefs obviously are going to continue working on a long-term deal. There's been no indication that the Chiefs are using the franchise tag as to keep a trade window open with Trey Smith. I mean, it's obviously still a possibility. I think that is very, very remote. We also should address the fact that even right now, the Chiefs don't have enough room under the salary cap to even fit the franchise tag. So there's a couple of bookkeeping moves that will have to take place in conjunction with the beginning of the new league year. Obviously, you convert a good chunk of Patrick Mahomes' signing roster bonus into a signing bonus, and bing, bang, boom, it's done, taken care of. You can fit Trey Smith. So, not that big of a deal, but we've been talking about the situation with Trey Smith and the bigger picture of the offensive line. And we've had a lot of questions from people who have just kind of, wanted to talk about the big picture of what the Chiefs have done, what they're doing, what the process is, and, kind of the, how the Chiefs have maybe gotten into this spot and how do they move forward? Because right now they've got, I think you could absolutely argue, 3 of the best in the business at their positions. At left guard, center, and right guard with Tooney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. At right tackle, Jawan Taylor, I think, is better than fans give him grief for. And the penalties have been an issue. The penalties weren't really as much of an issue. And we can talk about Chris Collinsworth ruining his life. I know the Chiefs will tell you that everything was fine until Chris Collinsworth decided to pick on him on opening night 2 years ago. But Jawan Taylor, I think you have to give credit, is not as bad as a lot of Chiefs fans giving some grief from time to time. And left tackle is an open question. Let's face that. But this Chiefs offensive line over the last couple of seasons, Nick, has not been, I think, as good as the sum of its parts. They've got some really good pieces. They have a hole at one spot, but this line is underperformed, hasn't it? Yes,
especially with what you're paying for the offensive line, and now throwing Trey Smith into the mix and that potential $23 million right now. And being, definitely over 80 million at that point collectively among 4 of your 5 starters. And that didn't even include left tackle, the premium position that you typically would expect to pay big money for, to pay that $20-25 million average per year range. Yes, that's where the big concern is. And that's where a lot of who the Chiefs are going to be, not only this year, but the years to come during the stretch of Patrick Mahomes' career when he's 30 and above. The offensive line protection and the importance of the offensive line will get magnified from each year going forward, because this is the next phase of Patrick Mahomes' career, and the ability for them to protect him and keep him upright and keep him healthy is going to be much, much more crucial and important to their Super Bowl hopes, to any potential dynasty hopes, to all that combined, because Patrick, when he was younger, he may be able to recover quicker from some of those injuries. But once you get 30 and above, even with Bobby doing all the training that he does with them for pliability and flexibility, those injuries are going to add up over time, and Mahomes isn't going to be able to scramble the same way 3 to 4, 5 years down the road like he is now. So that's where part of that offense is going to have to adjust to where it's not a fire drill anytime a defense has the right answer for their coverages. But more than anything else, the protection to buy the time for the receivers to get open is going to be a piece of that puzzle. And the offensive line's ability to open holes in the run blocking game and be more physical is going to be another piece of that puzzle that can also help Mahomes stay healthy. So there's a lot that this offense is going to be a turning point for this team and for what they can do with Patrick Mahomes in his 30s.
I go back to, especially when the Chiefs drafted Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, because before that, it was the notion was that the Chiefs, hey, they're a zone blocking team. That's what they do best. And then they started bringing in a couple of guys who were maulers. And the conversation was, okay, so are the Chiefs going to go from a zone blocking to gap blocking team and be more man and take on teams and be a little more physical? And what we've seen has been what Andy Heck is proud to say is as the team that goes multiple, that they do a little bit of everything. But are they a team that just does a little bit of everything but doesn't do anything well as a result of that?
You got to be elite at something. You got to be good at something you can always lean on no matter what. From a rep perspective, that kind of becomes the home for you, that you're not that you're kind of, not like you're not like Jack Reacher in that TV show Reacher, where you don't have a home, you just got the clothes on your back, and you kind of wander from time to time. You need to have somewhere that can be a home base for you and kind of be that comfort that when you need to lean on something, you can lean on. So in the run game, that's personally, in my opinion, what you need. And I think for the offensive line, I think Creed and Trey, I think those guys are guys that can run. They can run man if they want. They can run a man scheme if they want. They could do combo blocks. They can do that type of stuff. They're more than capable of being physical. It's just the last time I remember the Chiefs kind of using more of a physical run blocking scheme was back in 2015, whenever Alex Smith needed it, and the Chiefs had a dominant run game with play action pass off of it, and they won the first playoff game in 2015 that year, and they were able to turn it into a divisional matchup against Tom Brady, where they unfortunately lost because the Patriots were able to outscore them at a quicker rate. But overall, it's just like, that's fine if you want to have a variety and you want to be able to do this or that, but they didn't even use that variety in the Super Bowl. So, and you didn't have an answer in the Super Bowl with it. So, I mean, like, that's part of that problem is just when you try to have a wide variety of things, like at a restaurant, there may not be one thing that, you can lean on. That's your classic dish that people come there for, that you can perfect and you can always count on whenever you think of the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the identity. And like, that's something that other teams have. And for me personally, to see where George Warhop took the Ravens from August to the end of the year versus where the Chiefs were at the beginning of the year to where they were at the end of the year, that's really, really frustrating for me personally to know that occurred.
And I think the big question for me is that, because you talk about this, and I think one thing that there was a lot of observation of in 2024, and my question is, did this culminate in the Super Bowl where the Chiefs, from a blocking standpoint, just did not surprise the Eagles at all? Nope. They'd seen it all. I mean, there was nothing that the Chiefs did try to tweak some things in the second half, but even those changes did not surprise anybody. I mean, so is that just the issue a little bit? Is it just that, we talk about, and there have been questions and fans have always asked, is the offense too predictable? Is it getting too stale? Is it just a matter of that the offensive protections are getting dated and just a little bit too familiar to everybody, and too much of it is on film and been seen and just hasn't evolved in the last few years?
I think part of it kind of comes down to that, and then a part of it just kind of comes to talent as well, to where, I mean, from a formation perspective, they know what the Chiefs want to do out of this trips formation, out of this bunch formation, out of this 3x2 set, out of this 4x1 set. Teams kind of have a pretty good idea where they can pick up where the Chiefs are trying to go and what they're trying to attack. So from a pass rushing perspective, once they see that, they can adjust, and maybe this guy goes out to a little bit more of a wide 9, rushes at an angle, or if you do this, Mahomes is going to want to scramble out to this way and start a firing drill. So yes, I mean, I think the offense kind of has gotten a little predictable in terms of what they can be, and the teams know that if you flush Mahomes out of the pocket and have zone coverages, that they just don't have enough time to stop for Mahomes to find those windows within enough time before a rush gets there. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me personally, with some of the pass rush situation, the fact they really don't have an effective screen game and haven't for a while now, and part of that's because they don't have an explosive running back, and just part of it is it just there's obviously reasons that they feel like they can't call it on a regular basis and make it a part of their offense like they did early on in Andy Reid's career when he was calling it with Jamal Charles all the time. And occasionally Spencer Ware and Charkandrick West and everything, and some with Damian Williams. But yeah, it's just like the thing that I think kind of bothers me in it is you had 3 guys that were Pro Bowlers this year on your interior offensive line. You got a guy you're paying $20 million at right tackle, and you just got a revolving door at left tackle since Eric Fisher got hurt. And it's not – it just seems like it's a plug-and-play thing anymore. And I don't know if they're always featuring what's the best skill sets of the offensive lineman in kind of spotlight what they're good at and kind of use that to their advantage to kind of create what they can collectively be as a scheme and how they're going to attack a defense versus react to defense. Because I feel like sometimes that O-line's having to react more, and they're trained to react versus be the aggressor and be the attacker, especially in short yardage situations when you've got to have it and you've got to knock that guy over. Combo blocks are key in short yardage situations that you have to do. Sometimes you may have to do mano a mano, but there's combo blocks that if you hit the point of attack correct and you do that, you can get that first down without a problem. And for the Chiefs, they always seem to want to use like a jet sweep or the fullback dive with a misdirection or some type of eye candy with misdirection and everything. And you do those type of things when you know physically you're just not going to be able to do that. And they have offensive linemen that are capable of doing that in my book and were in college before they came here.
Yeah, I mean, go back to 2022, and this offense was the number 1 offense in the league. And Patrick Mahomes was the MVP. And really, I mean, the biggest significant difference, yes, you've brought in Jawan Taylor since then, but the biggest significant difference was really Orlando Brown was on the left side at that year. And hey, the reaction to Orlando Brown was mixed. I mean, it wasn't decidedly pro Orlando Brown or anti Orlando Brown, but I think that the general conventional wisdom of Chiefs fans was that they wanted something better. You have Donovan Smith in 2023, and honestly, I mean, the Chiefs' offensive production in 2023 and 2024 is negligible difference. I mean, it's been the same offense for a couple of years now, and probably worth discussing the wide receiver situation, because that's obviously been a little bit of a revolving door too. But we also have seen that the primary issue being that, hey, if Patrick Mahomes doesn't have time to throw, it doesn't really matter who the wide receivers are. So what is it? I mean, and how do the Chiefs address this? Because I feel like after watching this team the last 2 years and watching what happened in the Super Bowl, I mean, could you drop a 27-year-old Trent Williams into this offense and just have the same problems? Because I mean, right now you're looking at a team that has 3 all pro caliber offensive linemen. They're not just dominating.
Yeah, I mean, if you had Trent Williams, if they had been able to get him signed a while back the first time around at left tackle, things obviously would have been better. Things go a little bit differently. Maybe Mahomes never gets a high ankle sprain against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trent Williams has a couple Super Bowl rings to his name, and maybe things go differently in the Philadelphia Eagles game than what they did. But, I mean, the reality of it is, like, I'm concerned with their ability to be able to develop guys within the time that they need to, within the 3 to 4 year range, to really take them and help them rise to a new level, especially, you know, because, I mean, look, Jeff Stoutland is one of the best in the league O-line coach-wise. Bill Callahan has been one of the routinely better ones in the league. George Warhop has been really, really good. At the college level, you know, we've talked about him. The Oklahoma O-line coach has been turns guys out to NFL on a regular basis, and has 10 draft picks that have made it along the way, including Creed Humphrey. So with all of that, I don't know. I'm at a point where you can, like I've said before, you can go draft the guys. Like, Chiefs can go out and they can go draft an offensive lineman to play left tackle. But my question is, can you get him developed throughout the year if he has to get by from a technique perspective? If he can you get him to an NFL level of being able to pick up and pass off if he's with Joe Thuney? And can you get him his hand placement at the spot that you want? Can you get the punch that you want? Can you get the reset and the re-anchor the way that they work on at training camp, which is tough to explain, but it's easy to see when you see it in person, to where they occasionally, if a defender gets in, they do a swipe and then they put the hands in and they have a hop where they reset. And then they kind of have to determine from a pass when they're going against pass rushes, the three different sets that they want to go with, if they want to go about that route, because I know people talk about the vertical set on a regular basis, and then there's the 45-degree set I know that's talked about, and then you have kind of just a little miniature hop as well that they do. So I mean, they've got to evaluate that too from a scheme perspective. They got to decide what's going to be the most effective for them to run the ball and be able to run it at will, and having a faster running back will help in part of that, to where you don't have to hold the block as long, and maybe that back sees it quicker and gets through the hole, and then that takes the Chiefs run game to where they're more confident in it, feel explosive in it, and maybe that's a piece of that puzzle. But there's a lot there that the fact that they've invested as of now $80 million in the starting offensive line at this point, and we'll see where it goes from there. I feel like they're asking Joe Cullen, Brendan Daly, and Dave Merritt to essentially have to pick up the difference by developing guys across the board at their position groups on cheap contracts, so that they can afford an offensive line that at times, not from a player perspective, from a collective group like we've talked about, is middle of the road at times, and not as dominant as you're paying for. And I think that's the thing that the organization really has to take a hard look at this year and really determine what's been the problem. How do you develop these guys quicker? How do you develop them effectively when you're investing this type of money and draft capital into them? Because everybody keeps wanting to say, well, you got to get up into the top 20 if you want a left tackle. Sure, if you want an elite one, but if you need a middle-of-the-road serviceable guy that's not going to cost you $20 to $25 million, that may be what you need in this offense, because the Chiefs' defensive line, pass rush-wise, they don't have elite guys across the board that they're taking in the top 20. That's not the way the NFL works. So, and the Chiefs don't exactly have a ton of first-round picks in the secondary, but they make it work in the scheme. The Chiefs' linebackers don't have a ton of first-round guys, but Brendan Daly makes it work. The question that I think people are missing more than they should is the defense, as you talked about on the radio earlier this week. The Chiefs' offense, was it the offensive line's almost as much as the defense?
I was going to say, Spotrac has updated their numbers for that. And so versus with the cap numbers from 2025, the Chiefs are now number one with offensive line spending at cap total of $95.3 million. The entire defense right now has a cap value of 73.1. So right now, the Chiefs, for the cap, have $22 million more in 2025 tied up in the offensive line than in the defense. And if you want to say the Chiefs are being cheap, they're number one in offensive line cash for 2025 at $72.6 million. Defense right now is at 59.5 total, and even average annual value, the Chiefs offensive line is tied up right now at 84.2 million, defense 62.9. Now, hey, they're going to spend some money on the defense. We know that. And that average annual value will change, and certainly a little bit of the numbers will change with if and when Creed Humphrey gets a long-term deal when done, which I believe is going to happen. But right now, in all three metrics, the Chiefs are the number one team in the league in spending on offensive line. And what is their return on investment? It's not been great.
And I know people are saying, well, they won this, they've won all these games and had this dynasty and everything. And you're 100% right. But to have two Super Bowl performances go that way, and the offensive line be a big part of that issue, that's when it happens the first time against Tampa, and part of it's because you don't have Schwartz. Well, you didn't really have Schwartz most of that year anyways, and then you didn't have Eric Fisher, and that's when the wheels fell off, and you had to rearrange things. That's 100% fine. You had to rearrange things. But what is it from a skill set for those guys? What can they do? And from a scheme perspective, what had to be done a little bit differently so that they could hold up with the skill set that they have? Or are you just running the scheme and that's what that's going to be? And that's something I don't have an answer for. That's something the offensive coaching staff's got to figure out. And you look at this time with Philly, like you and I have talked about, like the Eagles didn't really pass rush to that level during the playoffs and didn't showcase that. And then they turned it on to a whole different level in the Super Bowl. And I think that surprised the Chiefs too. And I think it surprised part of what they were doing as well. But now the Eagles have shown you how other NFL teams may potentially attack you and where they can give you struggles, where they took the best of what each defense did to take away from Mahomes, and they put it all into one thing because they had a roster that could do that. So now you know something you're going to see down the road, maybe not on a regular basis, maybe in pieces, maybe against certain rosters, but you now know something you have to have an answer for. And I just keep reiterating with this that, like, I think that's where you've got to figure out a way down the road here to where you can develop the guys you're drafting, and you're not spending as much on that offensive line across the board, and you're getting those guys during that year 2, year 3, year 4 range to where they can play, but the next guys develop behind them to replace into that spot, and you don't have to necessarily worry about it. So you don't always have a revolving door left tackle to where, yes, you may not have elite play, but you have a serviceable guy that you can feel comfortable with and that can be able to get the job done. Yes, they may not be all pro, but they're not at that point where Mahomes is uncomfortable on a regular basis. Or maybe, it's cheaper guard play at one of the spots, or, maybe the right tackle is cheaper, but like down the road, those guys have to be ready at a certain point to where you're not spending $80 to $100 million on an offensive line. You need to be able to kind of spread that over the collective roster, and everybody's having to collectively develop up players versus just one position that seems to kind of get to spend too much of the money because you need veterans to manage versus guys to develop.
Yeah, and I say this, I've said this a lot, and because I learned it from watching Tyreek Hill, and that was really my evolution on this whole thing and how I just kind of developed this philosophy. And I tell this to players that I meet and everything too. Tell people in the locker room if they ever ask for it. I don't just like volunteer the advice, but if anybody asks, I'll tell them this, Nick. It's that in the NFL in particular, remember, for the Chiefs, between the end of the Super Bowl and the beginning of training camp, these guys have 13 practices for February, for March, for April, May, June, half of July. You get 13 practices in that time. And the Chiefs, hey, because they play these long seasons, the Chiefs don't have as much of a and even if they were in for OTAs, the first couple of phases and everything, they wouldn't be doing much anyway, because those phases are not physical. They're not practices. They're not teams. They're not even sometimes, one-on-ones. They're just, single individual training. It's not going to do anything. If you want to get better in the NFL year to year, the only way that you're going to do it is between mid-February and the beginning of July, and you got to do it on your own. You've got to go get your own coach. You've got to get your own training facility. You name it. You do it on your own. And I mean, if Kingsley Suamataia is going to, take a step forward and become a player, whether it's a tackle or guard, the only way he's going to do it is if he's doing it on his own. This is because you get in with the team, and teams don't have time to make you better. The teams have time to coach you to run what they do. And that's all they have time to do. If you don't know how to play, they can't fix you. They don't have the time anymore to coach you up because they don't have two-a-days. They don't have the ability to run these players into the ground anytime they want to, Nick. I mean, right. They can't. They just don't have the time anymore. So I always say, if you're going to get better, if you're not better by July 15th, 2025, you're not going to get any better during 2025.
Certainly a lot slower in increments.
Well, we're talking about one hole that the Chiefs have is that spot at left tackle. That's, I think, a good jumping off point to go into the free agent market, because as we've been talking about, some of the things that we wanted to discuss before the beginning of the new league year, Nick, which we are now officially less than 8 days away from the beginning of the negotiation window. And obviously March 10th, 3 p.m. Kansas City time is when that official period opens. But, we've talked last week about some of the Chiefs' own free agents and what they've got there. So if you missed that, make sure you go back and listen, and you can figure out about all 28 of them and where the Chiefs kind of stand and what their possibilities might be. But now let's look outside the Chiefs and maybe some of the options out there. And obviously left tackle is the big one, Nick. And one thing you have to deal with too is teams keeping their own guys. I know Alaric Jackson was a popular choice for a lot of Chiefs fans and maybe a possibility. He's got a long-term deal and will be staying with the Rams. So knowing that there still might be some deals that get done and teams that keep their own guys, Nick, with free agency, let's starting at left tackle. What do you kind of see right now?
Yeah, I looked over a lot of left tackles. What I came down to at the end of the day is you're either going out to get Ronnie Stanley, and you're going to have to be okay with his injury history, and you're going to be okay with paying him $20 million a year. But from when he is healthy, you're getting a really good athlete. You're getting a fundamentally sound guy, not anybody that you have to coach anything up on. You're just trying to do what you have to from a training room perspective to keep him up and going especially in key situations when you're going to need him. So we'll see if the Ravens let him hit the market. It would be smart on the Ravens' part not to let that happen. But if they do, then, there's a lot of teams that are going to covet him for, and willing to pay him the $20 million range. I looked at some other tackles, obviously, and I was underwhelmed with most of them. I just felt like there was too much that they were either going to have to fix, or they didn't have they weren't going to be able to stop guys coming from around the corner, or they get walked into the quarterback. And some of them were guards that kicked out to tackle that are trying to get tackle money this year. And they just probably aren't the best fits in the world for the Chiefs. The only other guy, and I emphasize this, and this is from outside the Chiefs organization, I emphasize this is like a 1-year prove it deal, and this is not the guy you want necessarily to be your starter. You just want to take a chance to develop him, would be Jedrick Willis from the Browns. I know people are going to say, oh my gosh, and roll their eyes and everything and say, no way. I get it. But I'm saying the Chiefs are going to need to have multiple left tackles just in case, hypothetically, if you do sign a Ronnie Stanley, you're going to need somebody who, if he gets hurt, that, you're working with behind him to maybe be in that spot. And maybe that's DJ Humphries, potentially at a deal to where you don't even worry about Willis. And Willis didn't have the best tenure with the Browns when he got drafted there. He had some high-end athletic ability, but obviously had some issues with rushers around the corner and just, didn't have his definitely needs a change of scenery at minimum. But where he goes next will kind of determine what his career can be. And in all honesty, if I were his agent, I would be saying, go to Philly. Go to Philly, go learn from the best O-line coach, and get a 1-year prove-it deal, just like Becton did, and try to raise your market for down the road here. But then finally, like you talked about in terms of retaining, would be DJ Humphries. Like that, I think that's the road they're going to end up having to go, both from a financial perspective, but overall, just kind of it keeps there from being a completely massive hole at that spot. But you are going to need to add somebody, whether it's Ronnie Stanley or DJ Humphrey, you're going to need to add another tackle to develop with them being there.
Yeah, and at least the vibes I get from the people that I've talked to in the organization has been, Nick, that the Chiefs feel, I think, the same way that you do about the top of the free agent class, which is that, the two big names, Cam Robinson and Ronnie Stanley, both have issues, both have injury histories. Cost is going to be maybe a little bit prohibitive. And the Chiefs don't necessarily want to put all their eggs in one basket. So, their likelihood is throwing numbers at that spot. Yeah. And that might mean bringing back a DJ Humphries. It may mean bringing in a affordable veteran like Willis. I could see that. And then, obviously they have the in-house candidates as is, even if they're not talking right now about Siwa Maria and Wanya Morris as possibilities. You still have the numbers there. You've got Ethan Driscoll, literally loved last year. Maybe he's going to work his way into the conversation. They've had a guy like True Godric that's, very similar to a guy in Philadelphia with Jordan that, He was an international guy that turned into a player. I mean, now you've got to have the coaching, but throw in maybe the Chiefs might even, consider another draft pick, and, might even go for undrafted free agent. I mean, they might take 5 or 6 shots at this left tackle spot this offseason. It just might not mean that they're going to put $20 million in any one of them, but could they spend $20 million on 6 different guys? Maybe. At least, on off-season paper, it might not be where they're at in week 1. But I go back to remembering, it really wasn't that long ago, Nick, that the Chiefs were paying a guy like Cam Irving $7 million to be a swing tackle and to be a backup at every position. They've been there before. So they may be back at that spot again where, they're trying to maybe not to pay a ton of money to the left tackle, but they might be paying a lot of money to the backup left tackle.
Yeah.
All right, we spent a lot of time there, but Chiefs have other positions to consider, Nick. So I know you've been scouring the free agent pool quite extensively. What else? Who else stands out to you as some of the players the Chiefs need to be looking at?
We'll go running back position. Jaylen Warren. I'm curious if the Steelers are going to use an RFA tender on him, and if they do, what level they use it on. He's a guy who can comfortably run in shotgun, and I think does the Chiefs' style of run that they would like out of shotgun. Obviously, he can do part of the power run game. He's done it in Pittsburgh if they did under the center type stuff. So I felt like he was versatile on that front. Thought he had enough burst. I don't think the Steelers are going to let him go. I don't think they'll let him walk. But right now, we're just going through all the options. Jordan Mason is really more of a stretch run zone style guy from the 49ers, another restricted free agent. He'll be coming off an injury. So we'll see what the 49ers end up doing in that front and how much they're willing to offer. Kenneth Gainwell from the Eagles has some explosiveness to him. Lighter sized player, so injuries have always kind of been a concern on that front and kind of been a battle for him. So I think that would be interesting in terms of if you did need a speed guy that could be change of pace, Gainwell, I think, could kind of give you part of that. But you're not counting on him to be the feature back. You may not be counting him to be on the number 2 back that takes a lot of carries. He could be more of a change of pace. So it'll be interesting to see what he gets on the market or who ends up potentially going after him. J.K. Dobbins, obviously, Chiefs almost took a chance on the prove it deal. He's probably going to want a little bit more from somebody out there, or he may just go back to the Chargers because he knows Greg Roman and that scheme and did well in it. You're not, again, he's kind of, he's going to get injured at some point. That's just part of his career at this stage. But you potentially, if you're kind of looking for a guy, he's another one that I think you at least have in your rotation, but you're not leaning on. And I think those are the key ones because I watched Travis Homer too. I don't feel like there's from the Bears, don't feel like there's a ton there that the Chiefs don't already have. Cam Akers, Chiefs have had multiple chances to go get him, and they didn't. And then Ty Johnson, I think, is a physical, bigger body running back that I think could work in the Chiefs scheme from the Bills, but I just don't anticipate the Bills letting him go, and I don't know number-wise that the Chiefs are going to what the Chiefs will do on that front.
Yeah, and the Chiefs, obviously, they haven't been a team that throws a lot of money at the running back spot historically under this current regime. I mean, they do like to go with younger guys. If they're going to go with a veteran as a third down back, they want it to be somebody who's affordable and has got some juice. I don't know that necessarily Samaje Perine is still in the conversation for this year, but he's going to be 33, but Raheem Mostert seems like a Chiefs kind of guy. But once again, he's 33. It'd have to be vet minimum for the Chiefs to really be considering him. But there's definitely some intriguing options. Just, whether the Chiefs have the money and whether they want to pay for it or whether they want to continue to try and find those diamonds in the rough in the late rounds or undrafted free agency.
Yeah. Next one of going to wide receiver. The first one, this would be at the top of my list. Damani Brown from the Commanders. If he hits free agency, we'll see, because the Commanders look like they're trying to kind of build their wide receiver group in a different way. They kind of fits Jaden Daniels' run style. Damani Brown they used a lot in the screen game, same way that the Chiefs would use the screen. If you saw Damani Brown on the field most of the time, the screen was coming half the time. But he has a lot of shake and dynamic ability after the catch. So whenever he catches just, a comeback route or, maybe a dig route, we ran a lot of crossing routes in Washington from the tape I was watching. And then, when he maybe runs a comeback route or, a corner route or those type of things, even some posts, like he is able to get a little bit of separation and does have speed to him and does understand like a high-low and zone coverage and where to kind of cut that route off and give himself an opportunity to make a catch. So he's probably the most dynamic that I think might be in the Chiefs price range if they were to potentially get a player like him. After him, I think Josh Palmer is probably size-wise the most reliable from the Chargers. If they were going to do it, Palmer's had some injuries off and on. I think the Chargers are going to look to kind of find some different receivers to really kind of complement their play-action style of game. Palmer's fearless, willing to go over the middle, make a catch, got a little bit of explosiveness to him, got a little bit of ability to break some tackles just like Brown would. So those would be the two that I in an ideal world, if they're $8 million or under per year or $10 million or under per year, those are kind of ones that I would personally be intrigued by for the Chiefs, and also kind of on a multi-year type of deal. I think there could be something there. Next guy that kind of gives them a little bit of juice, but he's very undersized, and he would be more of a used in specific ways would be Tutu Atwell from the Rams. Got the explosiveness. The Rams could use him on some corner routes, use him on some crossers, jet sweeps, screen game. He's got some speed and explosiveness to him. So, and he was in that Rams playbook. So, he's going to know from a route perspective how to do a lot of the Chiefs want. So, he would be an individual that I wouldn't use it as a mainstay, but if you're wanting like a fourth or fifth guy in the scheme, he would be that. While somebody like Damani Brown, I think, could be a good complement to Worthy and be potentially in that 3 range, that 2 to 3 range possibility from a receiver perspective and how many receptions you're trying to give to him. I looked at Tyler Johnson from the Rams, and he doesn't have a lot of shake to his game. He runs a lot of what the Chiefs already do in their scheme from the Rams, and he's well coached. There's just, after he catches the ball, there's just not going to be a ton there. The 2 most explosive plays he had were crossing routes where he caught the ball, defender went too wide, and he changed direction, and he ran 63 yards against the Lions and won, and then he had another good one against the Eagles. But on a play per basis, he wasn't one of the main targets, and he would kind of be a guy that maybe he's a part of your offense if you want to do something different, a guy who I think would understand the scheme. Taylor Wallace from the Ravens, good return guy. I think he could be good competition for Remigio. Again, he doesn't. The Ravens didn't have a lot of opportunity to get him involved in the offense because of how many guys they've invested in front of him, both in terms of draft and kind of big pay overall. So like I'm assuming he's going to be looking for a new opportunity that can get him a better volume of catches. And the Ravens really kind of kept his routes within 10 to 15 yards, so they really weren't trying too much. So for the most part, those are kind of the guys that I'm like, hey, at the end of the day, like Damani Brown, Josh Palmer, Tutu Atwell, those are the ones that you're going to see a little bit of an impact from. But I just wanted to mention those other guys. And KJ Osborne was with the Patriots, went to the Commanders, previously with the Vikings. He had some drops in Minnesota, and then his targets kind of dwindled from when he left the Patriots to the Commanders.
And it wouldn't surprise me, Nick, if the Chiefs' most expensive free agent investment at receiver in this offseason is Hollywood Brown. They've obviously expressed some interest in bringing him back. I would anticipate that it's probably would be another similar deal to last year as far as incentive laden, coming off another injury. And if you want to throw them into that, kind of category, they're going to be giving a Tyquan Thornton and Jason Brownlee, who were late season acquisitions for the practice squad last year. They're going to give them a chance to compete. I wouldn't be surprised if, they're in the category of like, okay, let's see what those guys got before investing elsewhere. But I'll be interested to see how, just how much of a player that the Chiefs end up in free agency on the wide receiver side. Are there any other positions on the offensive side that are intriguing to you?
Nope, we're going defense now.
I can't wait because I know there's one position group that I'm really excited about. But
all right, I'll start with D-tackle. I'm gonna put D-line together as one collective thing. T.R. Tart from the Chargers. I think he could be a sneaky rotational guy as a one tech for the Chiefs. He's got some power to him. Got a little bit more athletic ability than you'd think for his size. He's kind of a guy, journeyman, who kind of jumps around, in 1 or 2 year deal at a couple spots. But I thought the nose tackle job he did, playing nose tackle for the Chargers, I thought he showed a lot of capability, and I think he's somebody that could kind of help give Chris Jones a little bit of relief because of the power that I think he kind of has as a rusher and his ability to kind of shoot the gap at times and kind of the overall speed and the way he can kind of hold the line of scrimmage and the run game and everything. He's a little bit younger guy in his late 20s that I think from that perspective could be interesting. I think this guy's going to be too much, but Chase Young from the Saints on the 1 year prove-it deal. Chase Young's got – he's – at times he still shows glimpses of that top 10 pick and what he was before the knee injury and everything. And there's times where he, with the speed he can do and the way he can turn speed into power, some of the bull rush he has, he still has a burst at times and is able to show it. I think from a rotational perspective, I think he'd be interested if they can't. He'd be interesting to me if they couldn't bring him back a Minihue. But I think Young's probably going to get too much on an open market. So I don't know if that's going to be able to happen. Joe Tryon, the outside linebacker for the Bucs, I just like his long arms and his speed and kind of his rush style. The way he can kind of, the way he can rip, sometimes how he can power rush with those arms, how he's able to disengage and the explosiveness he has. He might be more of a 34 outside linebacker, and that may turn into like another Joshua Uche situation. So you just kind of see what Steve Spagnuolo would think if you asked him and consulted with him about it. We aren't able to, but if the Chiefs do, that's all that matters. And then maybe Joseph Asai from the Bengals. There's some sneaky good hustle to him. There's some good speed around the corner. And as long as he's not the feature guy and he's a rotational guy, I feel like there's a little bit of opportunity there to just have, and what I'm talking here is I'm talking guys that could help be rotational, not necessarily starters. Chase Young could be a starter potentially, and I could mention Josh Sweat from the Eagles, but that guy's going to get paid on the open market by somebody because of his performance in the Super Bowl. And I just don't know if the Chiefs are going to be able to invest that much. So, Matt, that's me on D lineman. We got 2 more spots after that. Your thoughts?
I'm really intrigued. I'm glad you mentioned Joseph Asai because that's a guy that is, perfect example of a guy that the Chiefs may go after. One of those guys coming off his first year contract, 4 years in. So, and could be affordable. Had 5 sacks last year as, a rotational piece for the Bengals. So I think would be a good fit. I'm wondering if you're saving the next best position for last though. So I'm kind of,
tell me what position.
Kind of excited.
Just tell me what position you want to go with, and I'm going to go.
Well, I know. I want to finish with the one I'm most excited about. So finish with corner.
Okay. All right. So we'll go linebackers then in front of it. The guy if you lose Nick Bolton, and that's the part of this that I'm taking into the equation. If you lose Nick Bolton, you have a couple decisions to make. You potentially bring back Willie Gay that would know your scheme, athletically could fit, already know what he's capable of, and be able to utilize him probably at the rate you wanted before he went to the Saints. And you could probably get him back and have him in a rotation of some capacity. So there's that. The second option, KJ Britt from the Bucs. There's some sneaky good ability there that I would love to see Brendan Daly and Steve Spagnuolo get the opportunity to work with. The way I saw him crash down the line and blow things up, and the acceleration he had to do it, and just kind of his sideline to sideline presence. I didn't get to see him a ton from a coverage and his drop and everything, but I know athletically he's above where Nick Bolton would be. But I trust what the Chiefs coaching staff could be able to do with him if they did sign a player of that caliber. And then finally, this would be a 1 year prove it. And this is something you just take a chance on, but you're not penciling him in as a starter, would be obviously Dre Greenlaw from the 49ers. Coming off that Achilles from the Super Bowl 2 years ago, the Niners had to shut him down last year. So you're kind of taking a chance, just like a J.K. Dobbins situation, to where you're having to do like a cheap base with a prove it type thing, and then try to figure it out after the fact. So there's that front of it. I watched some of Devin Bush from the Browns. I'm not sure that I just think he's probably a little bit more reckless than what they would want in terms of discipline and kind of some of the fill at times. Seems like he loves his athletic ability, and he's going to kind of lean on that and instincts at times, where I was just like, I don't really know. And then I looked at Akeem Davis Gaither. I loved him coming out of college, and he's probably – I think he's going to end up falling I think he's going to end up falling to that spot. So I don't know if the Chiefs will get that opportunity to – but I mean, I think Gaither would kind of be like a weak side. Him and Willie Gay, I see more as kind of that weak side, to where Tranquil would have to move into the middle linebacker spot, and then like a Willie Gay or a King would have to be more the weak side, with Leo as the strong side.
Yeah, and that's to me is the $1 million question. If you're the Chiefs, I mean, they need this. They need a linebacker, and I mean, Nick Bolton would be the most obvious one, because he's their Mike. He's the quarterback of the defense. It's the guy that they trust. Obviously, Spags trust him. I mean, Drew Tranquil, you got to love the dude. He has been such a nails player for this Chiefs team, but he is going to be 30 years old this year and has never been a full-time player. So for the most part, so idea of him coming in and being an every down middle linebacker, setting the defense, it's a tall ask for a guy at that point in his career. So, even if Drew Tranquil is your starting middle linebacker, and he obviously is the insurance for Nick Bolton, but he's going to have to share that. And whether it's with Jack Cochran or I think it's probably questionable about, taking any of your other guys and moving them back into the middle linebacker spot. I mean, for the most part, that's the guys who've been doing it. I mean, Drew Tranquil, Jack Cochran. I mean, you go down Cam. I mean, there's a few other guys that are in there too, but they just don't have an heir apparent. They don't have a successor there. So even, Leo Chenal, I mean, they envision him one day as maybe being a Mike linebacker, but they've basically abandoned that for the last 2 seasons. And I'm just not sure that it's, in their best interest of moving back to that spot, because I think he's too valuable where he's been playing right now.
It'll be interesting, Matt.
Well, I'm intrigued about the cornerback spot, because this is where I think the Chiefs would like to make a splash, and maybe not money-wise, could be tough for them price-wise, but they would definitely love to get a competitive level type starter at corner, and I think there's some guys out there.
So, from a corner perspective, there's only 2 guys that I'm really, really intrigued by, and I made note of it a long time ago, and then I just kind of kept waiting to see what the Chargers were going to do. And they're both 5'11", or they're listed at 5'11", so they may not be where the Chiefs are in that front, but they're well coached. Christian Fulton from the Chargers, just what he does in zone coverage, like he's so disciplined. Athletically, he puts himself in good spots, and I would be intrigued with what he could do with Dave Merritt. And then other one's going to be Asante Samuel Jr., and hasn't lived up to the billing that people thought he was when he was coming out. He's had injury history and everything, and he does have some tackling issues that the Chiefs would have to fix and being able to tackle. So they would have to kind of coach him on that front. They'd have to potentially have some decisions to make about health. But from a corner perspective, those were the 2. The other one, Molden, went back to the team, signed an extension, says he would have been another one. And then still the other corner that the Chargers got there now, he's a rookie, so he was never coming to begin with to that market. But when he does, I'll be curious to see where he's at after year 4. But yeah, the Chargers secondary, really well disciplined team that I think anybody they bring over from there, I think would be promising. And then lastly, I'll talk from a safety perspective, just to throw it in there. Hufanga from the 49ers, coming off injury and everything. He's represented by the same agency as Patrick Mahomes, obviously. He would be an interesting physical presence to take over for if Justin Reed were not to come back, to kind of be that box safety, kind of come down and kind of work inside the box and everything. If he was healthy, I'd be intrigued on that front. I watched Warren Thornhill to look and see where he was at. He still doesn't have the same range he did before his ACL injury his rookie year, but he does have better range than some of the other safeties the Chiefs have had back there. Definitely more than Mike Edwards when he was there. So, I mean, there would be a little bit of an upgrade there. And then, maybe the Chiefs still like what Kendall Fuller would potentially have from the Dolphins from his time in Miami to Kansas City. And there may be some opportunity there from a safety perspective to kind of be able to utilize him as kind of that veteran that could kind of fill in some spots here and there. And that's my free agency class, Matt, of guys to keep the tabs on.
Yeah, Christian Fulton's a really interesting one because I know you put me on his radar, to put him on my radar, however that may be, during the season. So I paid close attention to him. I think that would be an interesting choice, and maybe just because I've seen him a lot against the Chiefs. Nate Hobbs with the Raiders, I think is an interesting possibility. Might be once again maybe a little bit too pricey, and you don't want to get in a bidding war with the Raiders, but. That's the one position that I think that the Chiefs might take a shot at bringing a veteran in. Like I said, they're not going to spend $20 million on a corner, but they're saving that money for Trent McDuffie. But bringing in somebody who could, at least push Josh Williams and push Jalen Watson and be competitive for that second spot, because you want 3 starting corners at least. And I think they might take a shot at that. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of the guys on your radar, Nick, becomes a Kansas City Chief. So
I hope so. There's a lot of names on that list overall. So I hope I didn't do that for nothing. But I do want to emphasize that each one of those people outside of Ronnie Stanley, what I'm telling you right now is you're not trying to pay over $10 million a year for any of them. That's kind of what I'm getting at. You're trying to see for some of those guys, you're trying to see, can you do like a base minimum, prove it? Can you do 3 or 4 year base with some incentives built in and stuff like that for some of those guys? Now, Damani Brown, I think you'd have to pay a little bit more because of how weak that wide receiver market's going to be. If T. Higgins gets tagged, how quickly that'll go off that board, and when people may go at Damani Brown, maybe the guy a lot of teams go after, and then you're like, you know what? Nope, not going to work out. And Chase Young probably will cost more than what I'm thinking right now and doesn't work out. But I think there's an opportunity for the Chiefs if they want to add. If I'm in the Chiefs' shoes, if you can figure out a way to get a receiver, a veteran receiver, if you can figure out a way to get maybe a veteran running back, ideally one of the RFA guys if they hit the open market, whatever you have to do at tackle is what you got to do at tackle. And then if you can add another rotational piece, either at end or the defensive tackle spot, if you can add a linebacker and a corner, I just think you open yourself up to taking whatever you want in the draft. In an ideal world, you could lean more on drafting running backs, lean more on drafting defensive line, and, get yourself a corner at the right spot, but not really have to force it, and then be able to kind of take a receiver where you want versus having to kind of force an impact at receiver. So I think those are all a part of what if I'm in Brett Veach's shoes, that's kind of where you're trying to add some spots to where you don't feel forced to have to draft at a certain position.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. I'm expecting the Chiefs to be relatively quiet in the first phase of free agency, which, by and large is basically from the negotiation window opening on Monday and then continuing through really maybe midday Thursday. It's always interesting to see where the cutoff is, but usually there's that first wave over the first 3 or 4 days, and then there's a lull, and then for maybe even just 6 hours. But then all of a sudden, it's the group of players who didn't get their money in the first wave who are like, okay, I need to find my spot now before it gets too late. And you get some good deals. And that's where I think that the Chiefs, they might splurge. If the Chiefs get anything done in the first, 2 days of free agency, Nick, I think it'll be their own guys. There's a couple of deals that they could get done. Once that maybe some players are able to test the market and see what's out there, and then they're like, okay, well, what the Chiefs are offering is competitive, and maybe you want to stay. But the Chiefs, hey, I think that second and third wave is probably where they're going to be a little bit more aggressive, and they certainly were last year. So it's always interesting. Everything's always happening in the NFL, Nick.
That's right, Matt. Let's wrap this one up.
All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining us once again for one of our off-season shows as we get ready for the beginning of the new league year. Only less than 8 days away now as we're recording this. So I guess Well, almost. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm considering it because of the free agency period, Nick. So we're getting close enough. Everybody have a great week. We will see you Tuesday night for the Chiefs Digest Q&A, and then we'll be back next week with another episode of 41 is the Mic on Sunday as usual. Everybody have a great week. Hit the bell so you get notifications. Like, subscribe, 5-star reviews. Anything you can do to help us out, have people discover the podcast. We sure appreciate it. So everybody have a great week.
Good luck with your week. Bye now.
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHB 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.